I think we're about right. Yep. So, hi everyone, and welcome back to the very last session of our conference today. And we will have a roundtable, which will be moderated by, which will be chaired by yours truly. And we have the honor and the pleasure of having with us Gabi Bodar from London and Irene Vagianakis from Bologna to help us go through some of the topics that came up during this very interesting, in my humble opinion, conference. I think that we will have, first of all, the possibility of discussing some of the pending questions that we had and for which we did not have much time before. After that, I think that all of us have noticed that there are some common strains throughout all projects that can be perhaps deepened and discussed in greater details in this hour which lies ahead of us. Yes, so first of all, a question at all participants. Are there from your side any pending questions for the speakers of today? Because if not, I will like abuse my power of chairperson and ask a couple of questions myself if no one raises their hand. So, okay, that's I will take this as a no. So, okay, there's a question that has been, here throughout all presentations, and especially for Ilenia's one and the presentations regarding painted descriptions, so Maria's and Svetan's. Have you thought, I mean, you're all using Epidoc. Have you thought of creating possible like substandards only for your, I mean, not only for your corpus, but for your type of material? So like pretty much as we created like Sigidoc for the Byzantine lead seals or lead seals in general, are you thinking, for example, of a substandard for painted mural inscriptions? So I don't know if it's a fitting question or if it's too early to even think about it, but I just wanted to let it out.
Well, I'm only just learning Epidoc, as Gabi and Irene knows. So we actually do need to, as I mentioned, we do need to customize the current template, but to adjust it to our specific needs. But whether this will lead to something else, like you did for seals, I'm not. It's too, for me at least, it's too early to see. But as people working on painted inscriptions come together, this might be a way forward for the future. But definitely we need to adjust the current standard to our needs. But from customization to creating a new standard, I think, at least for my part, it's a bit too early. I don't know. We'll see.
Well, concerning the signacula, we are working of substandards on the customization of the Epidoc template. You know, especially you, Martina, know that we discussed a lot about the conversion between the 2 projects, and if the CGDoc template can fit in some way with our template. For now, I think and different issues, and we are working actually on different templates. I think that the most interesting thing will be how to manage the impressions of signacula in this project. Is of course crucial to give an ID for each impressions, and possibly I have not examples actually in the Sicilian collection, but possibly identify the signaculum related to these impressions. So of course we are working on it. For now, the most challenging thing was how to manage the different parts of the signaculum. Where are the inscriptions located? Where are the images located? And then will be interesting also to work on the textual content, of course. I mean, the owners of the signacula, the delegate of the owners of the signacula, and work on create the right customization to well, to use in the better way all this information that we have on this material.
Thank you so much. We have a question in the chat, and I will read it out loud, and people will start screaming for sure, because thank you for all these inspiring presentations. I'd like to ask you if in Epidoc or in CGDoc there is yet the possibility to encode monograms or letters in multiple ligature. And
this is the question of the week.
Yeah, I will remain in silence. Yes, as we jokingly said during the training week, we in CGDoc 1.0, there's not the possibility of encoding monograms as such, because we said it's too much. We will do that for the 2.0 version, because there's so much to think about yet. So at least for our need, because I think that, I mean, I don't want to answer all alone to this very thorny question, but I think that monograms are quite different if you're talking of monograms in classical epigraphy, monograms on seals, monograms on I don't know, on stems, monograms on signacula. So I think it's always a challenge, and which has to be, I guess, which has to be taken as a community, because before finding the right tags and the right markup for monograms, we have to first of all define what they semantically are to us, what they represent, and the way we want to, for example, display in a way which is both scientifically correct and user-friendly, all the multiple solutions that we have for monogram, because not all monograms are yet read with certainty, and there might be more than, I don't know, 5, I'm just making it up, solution for one, so readings for one monogram, and that's a very, very thorny question, and I would very much like to know Gabby's or Irene's or everybody else's opinion on this.
And I can say a few words about what I think the answer is to whether we can encode monograms and multi-character ligatures and so forth, which is that I sort of want to know what it is you want to encode about this, because if what we want to encode is, here is a string of 2 characters or 4 characters or X number of characters that are in ligature or in a monogram, then we can encode that. We can transcribe the characters and we can put a tag around them saying that these are ligatured or these are in a monogram. If we want to say there is a monogram here, and here's a photograph of it, or here's a drawing of it, or whatever, here is what it looks like on the stone, we can do that. If we want to say there is a monogram here, here's what it looks like, here are one or more interpretations of it, we can do that. If there's a more complex relationship between what we want to encode and what we want to display, then we need to define that what that is before, and we may decide that it's just too hard and that the best thing to do is just simply to say, here's what we think it means, 1 to n interpretations, and here's an image of it so you can figure it out for yourself. But if there's more we want to be able to do, like this, is this monogram a name? Is this monogram multiple names? Does this monogram indicate that it's in the genitive case somehow in its form? Does this monogram, by the way it combines the letters, also represent a cross? Does, all these other kinds of things that if we want to include those somehow semantically in the encoding of the monogram itself, personally that feels like overkill, but we're moving from text to iconography in the process of that, and that's something we need to think about. Then just that what exactly you want to encode needs to be decided, which I think is exactly the same as Martina said. I'm starting from the position that I think I know, unless you come up with something more complicated, whereas Martina was probably more intelligently starting from the position of I think we don't because it's complicated. But then you know what monograms are. I've only ever seen them and tried very hard not to care.
We too, but we have to at some point.
Yeah.
No, I'm just kidding. For example, thinking about monograms on seals, it would be amazing to have, for example, an index of monograms where monograms are, first of all, where they are displayed. So for starters, then all the letters are there. So all the letters that you can figure out are there. And there's always the, so a very naive example, you can always read a iota within a monogram. So what do you do? Do you think that there's a iota there? How do you, are you certain? How certain are you? Because depending on one iota, you can change the reading of the monogram. So there's a lot of things to be taken into account. And for example, in my ideal index of monograms, then you will have also, all the letters of the monograms, and also all the possible solutions. And yes, and that's interesting. It can be done, but I think that first of all we have to come up, at least within the community of sigilographers, with a consensus on how we want to proceed, like not for Sigidoc or Epidoc, but the step before, if I might say so. And
I feel like everything you've said there, Martina, is equally true of a line of cursive text, for example.
Yeah.
There are some letters in there that we need to read, some letters we need to say they're uncertain.
Yes, but the thing is, for example, that the difference, in my opinion, between a monogram and a line of text is that you have n possibilities of recombining these letters. right? And sometimes it's easy, sometimes it's not that easy, sometimes it's just a word, sometimes it's a whole phrase. So I wonder how one can take all these pretty much variables into account and make it like also searchable. I'm thinking also, I mean, in terms of searchability and usability, but perhaps I'm just overkilling it.
Yeah. I mean, there's a couple of people have their hands up, Matt, but I just want to just try and sort of cut the Gordian knot a little bit, if you like, by saying we should be either treating monograms as text or as some sort of image iconography combo, or as both, but not trying to complicate our lives too much by trying to do them all in the same place. You know, we can say, here is the text we think it is, and this is the image that we without making it too complicated. What we want to display on the page is relatively simple once we break it down into those parts, I think. But sorry, over to three.
There's Pavel and Olga and Claudia, just shout.
Yeah, maybe a follow-up to what you said about an index or a searchable database of monograms. I think it would be extremely useful to have here kind of an instrument for image recognition, that you upload the image of the monogram and then this compares it with other images you have in the database and gives you a more or less positive match for this, what you have for your research, because it can be well, very subjective in which order you place the letters from this monogram, and then you have to try a number of combinations before you come at the right place in the index. So I think that such thing like image recognition would work better here.
Yes, I think that also image recognition would be very useful for that, because I mean, perhaps the machine can tell you better which line goes where, and there's no place for too much subjectivity. It's great, but for example, for monograms, I'm thinking about the book of Robert Find, that he made this thing very intelligently, in my opinion. So just all the letters in alphabetical order, and then you do what you think it's better, because of course already giving the order, so a precise order of letters of the monogram already implies that you know the solution. But it was just a small follow-up on that, and image recognition would be great. And Olga?
You're muted.
Olga, you're muted.
Mute myself. Yes, now you can hear me. Thank you. Actually, what Gabrielle said earlier and what followed on with Pavel and what you added are all things that, I also want to stress. So partly, my comment has been covered. The only thing I would like to say is that I believe that definitely image recognition would be very useful. Monograms can be easier or harder to decipher, depending on how many letters are involved. And I'm just giving an example which has nothing to do with seals. It is a monogram that is carved on stone with 3 letters. It happened that it so happened that I studied this kind of monogram, and then it came to my surprise that, this exact monogram was spread on various architectural elements all over the Mediterranean. So image recognition, which allows us, if all this material is in a database, which allows us to find out where you can see this exact same monogram, because even when you have monograms with, the 4 or 5 same letters, their position in the monogram might differ. So I think that, it is equally important, and maybe even a bit more important, to definitely treat monograms, I think, both as text and certainly as image iconography. So that's what I want to say. I have a question, but I would wait until Claudia, I think, now makes her comment. Thank you.
Very short comment. I do not want us to get stuck with monograms, but one idea. None of us really seems to like them, and for reasons. But coming back to what Gabi and Martina said, I think it's a big advantage. I mean, it's a chance to be able to mark up alphabetical orders of letters contained in monograms, and this would help us to find other letter combinations on monograms that are preserved only partly. And so I'm afraid we never really thought about marking monograms, but we should definitely do this in the next step, as Martina said already. So we must not leave them aside, but should rather try to make a thing of it somehow. Okay, so that's for monograms possibly.
And there's a small follow-up on monograms about what Gabi wrote in the chat. And there are some monograms who are like unambiguously interpreted. I don't know, I'm thinking, I don't know, all the monograms from, yes, I mean, all the things that are, for example, in Zakos or in Oridan, what one could take those already unambiguously interpreted monograms as starting point for a possible image recognition tool, and then build up on that. But that's too much to ask in this moment from me. I am not competent in any of this, so it's just a wish. And for example, very last thing on monograms, the thing that I always thought about is, for example, we know somehow many interpretations of monograms. So we could, for example, create a control vocabulary. We could teach the machine all of these possible interpretations, and then just play around with the letters and letter combinations and letters that can be read once or twice or 3 times. And if one writes, perhaps to write a program, then it could spit up a coherent combination of letters, which is not like just gibberish, but you have already fed the information to the machine. And yes, that's it. But it's still, I mean, it's still very much in the cloud. So just exactly a crossword solver, exactly. And that's why I went into digitography, because I love doing crosswords. But still, so did you want to make another to ask another question, Olga, that Claudia did not cover?
Yes. Yet another very small comment. We should start from what is known. And actually, I remember now, of course, that there are seals where, on one side you have a monogram, and on the other side, the monogram is explained. So we will start from this, which is, the secure base, and then go on. Anyway, but now on a completely different subject, which was hinted during the presentations. And I think that, it probably touches upon any digital database, which is what happens with images and copyright. It's, I think, a difficult issue. I mean, while showing the SIGI doc, I saw under images as kind of, what are the next steps? RTI images. But this is, just another type, better type of image that might be nicer to, include in the digital presentation of a sale. But what do you do with the copyright? And the question becomes more difficult, because in the last decades, auction houses have gone digital. And of course, You never know who has bought the seal, if somebody has bought the seal. And then the photo, you know, is there. It doesn't go down if the seal is bought. So anyone could get the photo and make a publication of the seal. I don't know, how does one deal with that? I mean, if the seal is known to be part of a state or private collection, you write and you ask for permission to publish and whatever. What do you do with seals that appear on online auction catalogs? I don't know.
Yeah, that's a key point actually also for the future of the research, because we almost have more seals in online auctions than they are published every year. So we are forced to use them. I know, without giving details that are not useful, but there are publications currently of one seal, two seals sold through online auctions, and the photo is published without really asking. There is, I think, a gray zone. It is true that if you read the condition you have to agree to participate to these auctions, the auction houses explicitly state that they own the copyright of the photo. So there are two levels to deal with: the copyright of the photo and the ownership of the object. So basically, the photo is the most important, because we can objectively, not contacting each auction houses, which cannot reveal the name of the owners, of course. So we are forced to work with these photos. But if it is one seal, two seals, it won't be a problem in a certain way. It could, but if we start as a specialist, if the specialists of the discipline start to publish systematically this material without asking, here, in this case, there will be a huge problem, I think. At the same time, we cannot think that this material doesn't exist. So the solution, the easiest I see, is to publish the edition with a link to the photo where it exists on the website of the auction house. I don't think that the copyright is the data coming from the seal are concerned by this kind of problem. The owner maybe could be concerned because I give my own experience. If I bought sometimes seals, if I found in an article one of my seals published before, then I do that. I wouldn't be very happy. But actually, what I could do against that, objectively, the other person could not ask to the sigilographers and historians working on Byzantium, did you buy these seals? It's impossible. So as far as it concerns the data coming from the seal, I think this is not a problem. The link to the auction house is, I think, the best way, and we don't need to ask for that. I think they will be just happy that scientific publication points to their website. I don't know.
I think this is very common sense. Drawing from this, let me expand a bit my question very quickly on the photos that are published on Sigidog or any other database. Should they have a watermark? Of course, they will inform the user who is the body that has the copyright. Of course, this is it's without any question. But should they have a watermark, or should there is a function that does not allow the user of whatever database to copy and paste the image? What is your opinion on this? I mean, I don't know, it's a question for everyone. I don't know. Because, for example, the Dumbarton Oaks online database for seals allows you to enlarge them, to reduce them, to copy them, to reverse them, to do whatever. And I don't know. I mean, I'm grateful for that, I'm just saying whether, one should also think about this and place certain restrictions. Does this make sense? I mean, one still needs to apply to Dumbarton Oaks if one needs to republish a seal. That is also certain. But yeah.
Yeah, this is the case of a research center which does not make money with those seals. This is a completely, it's like a library, archives. So it is necessary to ask, because it is not because a photo is online that it is freely available. But after that, actually, yeah, they help the research and they are publishing quickly and freely this material, so it is consistent with the policy. So it's not. But in the case of auction houses, I don't know what it could be better. If you take an image, you should state from where it comes, to do things as for a citation from a book. It's not different. A link, but again, we want or not the image. Well, we can have or not the image. After that, add to the image some informations, saying to people, we are not the owner of the copyright. We should have received before, should have been authorized before from the owner of the copyright to do that. I don't know if this really solved the problem, if I understood your question.
The nuance, the subtle nuance, is that Dumbarton Oaks online database for seals, they own this material. So I suppose they can portray them in any way they want. And they should expect that any researcher who uses this database will ask them first for permission if they want to reproduce the images. However, Sigidog or our Tacticon and other databases, they bring together material from various sources, from various museums, from various private collections. So my specific question was whether on online databases of that sort, the images should have watermarks, or a command that says that it is impossible for the user to copy. Of course, the copyright will be mentioned, so anyone who would like to use this kind of images should not be able to take them from these, let's say, secondary databases, but go back to the original owner. Something like that. I don't know. I'm not sure myself. It's just, something that
I only can give you some examples, practical examples of my experience, because for a project for founding, we are planning to collaborate with the Bibliothèque Nationale de France, and they are going, if successful, we are going to pay for new new photos, new digital photos of the Zarkos collection, and they will be available through a mean known, I don't know it in depth, but IIIF, which means that they don't give us the photos as they are for our website, but they will be visible on our website, but coming from the Bibliothèque Nationale website.
Okay.
This is a way to do.
Mm-hmm.
Another, but again, this has been negotiated, and with the British Library, we are currently with Martina and Vivian. We are currently editing their collection, and they allowed us to use their photos on paper, on internet, etc., with a limited size.
Okay.
But a very good one. We don't need more than that.
Mm-hmm.
The full resolution of
Mm-hmm.
this photo will be available on their catalog, and we are forced. We negotiated and we accepted that we linked our editions, each one of our editions,
Okay.
to the corresponding catalog page on the British Library website.
Okay, that's a good solution. Yeah.
We had this kind of, but again, they do not make money with. They are institutions, cultural institutions. They are not auction houses.
Mm-hmm.
Could be different.
Yep. Yeah.
Could be different with them.
So I think that this is a very big issue that is not much digital as it is actually a question of I mean, also for a print publication, you would need to discuss these topics. So yes, it's thorny, but I always think that I'm young and naive, and I want to. I think that I mean, putting this data, independently from the pictures, putting this data out and publishing them is actually more important than having a nice picture there. So I mean, the content of the seal, I think I would be very much, I would be more concerned and more upset if I were the owner of the seal or of the inscription or whatever, if someone actually published the text and edited the text, so edited the content and commented on the content, rather than if they had published a very nice image of it. But so just to divert to redirect our roundtable away from this very, very thorny question of images and copyright. I wanted to, but we're still remaining in the realm of images, to be honest, because we have heard a lot of, I mean, Svetan and Maria, who are working on very interesting and also very similar in a way projects. I mean, you mentioned, I mean, both of you mentioned that you want to like investigate the relationship between iconography and text. Yes, I mean, for example, both the speciality and the actual, how can I say, relationship between iconography and text from a content point of view, from a spatial point of view, and this applies actually also to Arik and Andreas, because we have this kind of issue, this kind of yes, this kind of feature in the graffiti too, if I understood correctly. Do you have like any thoughts about how we should like go on in this kind of respect? And since, I mean, I have myself no ideas about it, to be honest, and I try to think about it while you all were speaking, but I'm very curious to hear your opinions. And both, I mean, mainly in a digital way, I must say. So how do you think you are going to deal with the relationship between iconography and text in a digital way, but also, I mean, from a content related point of view?
Can I interfere? Because as far as I see, Tsvetan is not here, but I'll be
also... Tsvetan is not here.
He had to go to attend some other events, I think, but since we will be working together with him on this anyways, he is the specialist and the guy who will try to apply the previous experience from Telamon, but things are quite different, of course, and one of the main differences is the fact that, of course, as you noticed, these are legends accompanying some graphic scenes. In ancient inscriptions, we may or we may not choose to classify inscriptions by types of scenes, and the details of their descriptions may vary if there is any iconography to the inscription at all. We at least are currently trying. We're in this phase of the project. We decided that it will be much more easier because encoding a particular mural will require for us to think about what kind of new features or we could introduce or we could modify from the common Epidoc templates. And this seems to us a bit more complicated question, but we can always start with authority lists. So now we're on the stage of making some authority lists of places, people, personages in the iconography, which should be a pretty straightforward task, no matter how we decide to encode the inscriptions. For which, by the way, I would like to talk with Maria and Theoharis and their team. That's a whole other story. So we're currently preparing an iconographical index, which might be of use for application and modification to similar projects outside our area, territorial or chronological. So I'll be more than happy to share this with everybody once it's ready, because I guess that there will be at least 70-80% similarities between things. Of course, there are different periods, different styles, different schools maybe, but the main iconography remains the same. So these are my 2 cents on the question. I don't know if Maria or Theoharis have to say something different, and I would also like to notice that Paula is trying to raise an issue from quite some time.
Sorry, Paula, I did not see your hand. I'm so sorry.
No problem, Martina. Hi to everyone. It's a great pleasure to be here with you all. Some friends and colleagues that we were together in an Epidoc training in 2018 in London with Gabi. And so first, I would like to thank you, Martina and Dimitar, for this opportunity to participate of this great event of digital epigraphy. And I have 2 questions. One of them is linguistically, what is the biggest challenge in working with seals, Martina? And the other question I will do now. What are the main differences between Epidoc and the CGDoc? Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Paolo, for this very interesting question, and I'm so glad that you brought up the linguistic aspect, which is very interesting, and it is not yet as developed as we would like to. and this is a feature that we actually discussed during the training week last week. So it's quite recent and quite fresh. I mean, from a CGDoc point of view and from an Epidoc point of view, seals are actually, so the main, I would say the main, I mean, not difficulty, but the main interesting thing about it is that they have a lot of, I mean, the language has a lot of what Greek linguists would call mistakes. So we have a lot of iotasistic variant readings and a lot of things that are not written the way you would expect them to be. So there comes the very big question of lemmatization, because I think that in our case, it is very interesting and very important to make such a big, I mean, not this corpus, I mean, but the potential corpus of seals encoded in CGDoc, which could be pretty big, to make it useful and searchable also for linguists and philologists. So how does, why I'm talking about lemmatization, because we do not want to normalize the Greek in the edition. So if dikitis is written with epsilon, eta, omicron, iota, and whatever, we would leave it like that. But then when you want to look for a dikitis, you can search for it both, you know, with spelling mistakes and in the, let's say, right Greek form. And I think that's crucial for us to lemmatize what is relevant. I mean, I don't know if we would like to lemmatize all articles and or particles, I don't know, but perhaps the most relevant, the most relevant features by all means. So so that it, I mean, it would enable searches like, let's see how many times the word dikitis in the 11th century is written with this and these kind of features. I think it makes sense. It could be interesting to explore. And as for the difference between Epidoc and CGDoc, I ask the other.
Well, the differences are not huge, and it is intended to be not huge because we tried to stay as close as possible to Epidoc to ensure consistency, the interoperability, as one says, and the compatibility among all these projects. What we did, said, if I can say it in a very simple words, is to adapt, to select, and in some cases to change the recommendation of Epidoc. The difference, the clearest evidence depends on the fact that seals have two faces. This means that an important part of the edition page is dedicated to the obverse and reverse. Besides that, there are features such as physical features in the physical descriptions, which are different, starting from the shape, but again from the material, for the way seals are produced, generated. So we talked about the matrices with Olga 1 hour ago. So we introduced some elements which are typical of a sigillographic edition. From the point of view of the markup, of course, we reused the Epidoc TI in this case, we use, for example, the element MS-DESK, a manuscript description, but which is the description of a seal exactly as in Epidoc. This is a description of an inscription. So at the very beginning of my experience in Epidoc, in digital humanities, and starting thinking about Sigidoc, my first idea was to create a markup dedicated to sigillography. It wasn't a good idea. Obviously, as many talks with many meetings with Gabby in London showed me very clearly. So it is, of course, we lose something from the semantic point of view. We are not working on manuscripts. But the gain, what we have is the possibility to associate this material with material coming from other disciplines, epigraphy, but also codicology, if I think to TI, to the more general TI. So from the point of view of the markup, the differences are very, very limited. And there are a lot of generic elements we use to introduce more sigillographic part of the template. So not to create, in order to not to create problems with this compatibility. There are other changes. For example, we really wanted to use a font dedicated to the diplomatic edition. This is a difference from the capital Greek letters we often see in epigraphic editions. But again, there is still a diplomatic edition. This is not basically a difference. We have footnotes. Charlotte and Gabby knows that I really like footnotes, and you won't find a lot of digital edition with footnotes. But I really wanted footnotes. But again, it is not a major change. I thought that it could be very useful when you convert a paper publication, and you know what to do with all the footnotes. You know where to put them, and basically the schema is Epidoc and TI compliant. So the very nature, the DNA of Sigidoc is shared with Epidoc.
And I think that Gabby wanted to say something.
Please, I have one more question.
Yes, please go ahead.
I remember there was an article talking about epigraphy in 2017. I forgot the author, sorry, but it was 5 years ago, 4 years ago. And thinking about the future, what we can wait for the digital epigraphy, about digital technologies, sharing the works, and what do you all think about the future of digital epigraphy? Will be more about sharing, develop other languages of sharing, tools for photogrammetry, for example. What do you hope for digital epigraphy in the future? In the future, I said, 5 years, 10 years, I think it's long.
If I may add something on this, so I think that's something that we all really want for the future is going towards the creation of more standards and not standards, but substandards, expanding culturally, chronologically, geographically, what we already have for epigraphy. So Epidoc started mainly with Greek and Latin epigraphy, mainly on stone, and then now we see that we have specific substandards for seals, and from what we have been seeing today, there are a lot of new projects on areas that were not so much covered so far. So all the Byzantine world and expanding towards the east, and also by typology of inscriptions, so like signacula and so on. So we really would like to see more shared vocabularies, shared authority lists among the projects, in order also to avoid some of the errors or not the linear paths that have been taken in the past for other disciplines. So now that we have all the tools for having a community approach towards sharing as much as possible these things.
Exactly.
Thank you, Martina, Alessio, and Irene. Thank you so much.
I think that Gabby had his real hand raised for a while.
I did, but I also don't want to jump in front of Elena if she had something to say.
There's Elena. Hi.
I just lowered my hand not to interrupt Gabby, but I was wondering whether you have, probably this is very stupid and you have already solved it, but still I have to ask because we are struggling with this problem in our project. So I'm going to share the screen for just 1 second in order to make it easier for you. And because sorry, I've tried to make the words in English, but I couldn't actually. So here we have the lemmatized text, of course, and this is our particular problem. It depends whether you insert the symbol with the accent or you add the accent with your keyboard, and it reads it like two different lemmas, but they're obviously the same. Same here and a lot of places. So basically what I did is like manually copying and pasting, but that takes so much time.
I may or may not be understanding the problem, but I think that sounds to me like a normalized Unicode question. We could maybe talk about that privately sometime.
I think that Tom posted a link in the chat relating to this very.
Okay. But even if you have both different versions in your text, you can either normalize it across your text afterwards, or you can normalize it at the point of indexing and say just index the normalized form, which so it will treat an iota with an acute accent, regardless of which of the 3 ways in Unicode you've done that.
Okay.
But we can talk offline, but I'm a little bit surprised that we haven't written that sort of thing into things like the Epidoc style sheets and FS already, but maybe we haven't. But yeah. But just to say that was certainly not a stupid question. There's definitely no such thing. I wanted to come back to Alessio's comments about the differences between Epidoc and Sigidoc, and this came back to the question that I think Martina asked at the beginning, is whether various people wanted to have sort of sub-standards of Epidoc. And I want to very much agree with what Irene just said, but to maybe put it in a different way, what I hoped the answer was to Martina's original question, and that what I hoped, what I thought the answer was when I first spoke with Alessio 6 or more years ago about this, was that that we don't need a separate standard, that we can incorporate the needs of these subcommunities in Epidoc. And the fact that that SIGIDOC is now, as of 2 months ago, a clean sub-schema of Epidoc, have sort of showed that works. So what I would, to sort of, again, come back to Irene's point, Epidoc was originally proposed, and its examples that were really proposed in 2000 or so, for Latin epigraphy. And pretty soon, it started being used for Greek epigraphy, and a few small changes had to be made. And then it was used for papyrology, and more changes had to be made. And various other things started to be incorporated, and Epidoc became bigger and bigger and better each time. And I would like to think that, you know, with the incorporation of work on seals, that would also happen. And with various different kinds of inscriptions, various different languages, various different epigraphic communities, things will continue to sort of expand and become more useful without them having to say, I'm not using Epidoc anymore, I'm using something with a different name. I think the reason that SIGIDOC has a different name is partly because the changes, while the changes are almost all to what people have been calling the template, it's how you want to display your results, and some of the data fields that you want to see in your edition. That are maybe different from what were in Greek and Latin epigraphy and papyrology that the examples mostly used in Epidoc are. That in itself doesn't mean this isn't Epidoc anymore, it just means it's Epidoc with a few fields that haven't been used before. But it's partly because, and that is you know, a significant difference, but I think it wouldn't in itself be enough to redefine the standard. But it's partly because there is a coherent, separate community of sigilographers who are more comfortable using something called XML standards for sigilography than they are using something called XML standards for epigraphy, and, you know, being told, but it's okay that you're not doing epigraphy, right? I mean, I think that's the main advantage of SIGIDOC, is that sigilographers will look at it, which they might not at Epidoc. And we didn't have that issue with papyrology because, you know, papyrologists already recognize that epigraphy is basically the same thing as papyrology. But I think that is important. So if you have a community who, you know, so same with, you know, Byzantine epigraphy, you know, we didn't need to redefine the epigraphic standards for, because people pretty much understood classical epigraphy and Byzantine epigraphy would be the same. For Near Eastern, so, you know, cuneiform epigraphy, I think people wouldn't be comfortable saying, I'm just going to do what Greek and Latin epigraphers do, and, you know, just with the differences I need. Even though the differences are very small, it's useful to have a separate set of standards. Likewise, Egyptology, Southeast Asian epigraphy, Maya epigraphy, whatever, it's useful to give these things different names. But in most cases, what we're talking about are slightly different guides to usage. They're guides to good practice within and alongside Epidoc. So I would say, rather than Epidoc is one standard for mostly epigraphy and papyrology, and these are sort of other standards, Epidoc is more of a sort of an overarching subset of TEI, specifically for ancient documents of one kind or another. And the epigraphic standards and papyrological standards, which have up until now been the core of Epidoc, are one guide to practice within that, but SIGIDOC is another guide to practice within that, and various other guides to practice that exist alongside that as well. So this is not to say that that there shouldn't be what Martina called sub standards or partner standards, but but we should think of them as having a different sort of relationship to each other. We want, after all, to maximize compatibility and interoperability, as Alessio said, and having being able to sort of inherit changes within that. So this is why I'm very pleased that, for example, we originally had an Epidoc schema, which is derived from TEI, and a Sigidoc schema, which is derived from TEI, influenced by Epidoc. We now have a Sigidoc schema, which is cleanly derived from Epidoc, with well-documented explanations of where it's been tightened up. So Epidoc is only derived from TEI in the sense that TEI allows you to do 1,000,001 things. Epidoc only allows you to do 400,000 of those things, and Sigidoc only allows you to do 300,000 of those things. Right? So it's a subset, and that's those numbers are obviously made up, but so I in different contexts, we might rhetorically, for rhetorical reasons, want to say two different things. To scholars and to our colleagues, we might want to say Sigidoc is different from Epidoc. To standard setters and developers and people who are concerned about learning the technical skills to make these things work, we want to say Sigidoc is exactly the same as Epidoc. They're just two different names for the same thing.
Yeah, thanks, Gabby, for explaining this better than I did. And yeah, something that we absolutely would appreciate is that every one of you that doesn't find in the guidelines what he's looking for, because it wasn't needed so far for epigraphy, for papyrology, please try to make a ticket on the markup SourceForge page and write to the markup list and say, hey, we have this need and this is not dealt in the guidelines, so that we can expand the guidelines and be as much inclusive as we can. Something in particular that, well, Martina, is a point that Martina raised before, is a strict relation between text and image, that images that we have in all the Byzantine medieval painted inscriptions, but also in a certain way in the seals, in graffiti, of course. And this is something that was not so central in the original Epidoc guidelines, but I think this is something that could need some big improvements, and it's something that it's quite challenging, and I think I've noticed that it's shared among many of the projects that have been presented today. So we hope to see something going on this topic.
Yeah, there's a discussion going on in the chat, and I would have to say that there are now Mayan inscriptions and Devanagari inscriptions also incorporated in the Epidoc community. So if you wish to start something new, you can, as we said to our trainees during the last week, you can subscribe to the markup list and search for answers there, maybe. Okay.
So thank you, Tom, for coming. Bye-bye.
Yeah. Thank you.
So, Maria, please.
Yes, I see we've reached that time, but I just want to ask, how do we proceed now? Because this is something, it's a burning issue for us. I mean, we talked about coming together and discussing common, terminology. And so my question is, how do we implement this? Because, we need really those of us dealing with the late post-7th century to come together and start the discussion. And for the non-experience, those of us who are entering now the field, and also from the point of view of art history, we need to come together. So my question is, how? What is the next step? How do we realize the potential that we saw today. I mean, and the dialogue between the two projects, because we need to do this. So what do we do? Is it a mailing list, another meeting? How can we proceed?
So if I may answer 1 second, I think that it was very interesting that in this training week and in this very day, we had like more Byzantinists than we have ever had, like ever in those trainings. So it's overwhelming and it's great, and it shows that perhaps something is moving in the right direction, if you tell me. We were discussing with Alessio actually during the lunch break this very topic, and I think that since, I mean, as long as we are like forced home with Zoom meetings, I think that's the moment that we all convene. And I mean, because I mean, let's talk about authority lists, for example, and control vocabularies and shared files of this kind. They go across sub-disciplines, they go across times. So as we were saying before, for example, an episcopos is an episcopos for you, is an episcopos for me, is always like that from the 5th to the 15th century, if not before and after. So I think that we should, and not only the projects who are having a digital, who have a digital, side to them, but yes, so just to convene and to talk, I mean, to raise this point, of a shared terminology, and in some of the fields, let's say. And yes, Tom is pointing to the epigraphy.info workshop, and so I think we should do for Byzantium and for our sub-disciplines, let's call them so, what has been done for Greek and Latin epigraphy on stone for a long time. So to have a set of shared terminology, and I mean, for the near future, when more of these projects will have a digital side, which will based, and we strive to it either on Epidoc or on Sigidoc, if we're dealing with stubborn seals people, they should share this kind of files, which you have seen during these presentations, will enable you to have consequent indices, will enable you to have consequent search features, and so on and so forth. But I think that the problem is less digital than it is conceptual, if I may say so. But from a practical point of view, I think that we should definitely join a group of people representative of each sub-discipline and just say, okay, we're having a Zoom meeting before the Congress, and let's think about what and how and on what terms. I don't know if it doesn't make sense, or if I'm just, yeah, please. There's Mitko, Gabby, and Claudia.
Well, I would like to say we already discussed during the training that there are control vocabularies here and there, including the Ego Europeana one, but they're too vast and too vague, I have to say, and not too specific. As far as I'm concerned, it is we would be able to share things as the authorities we have made so far about the document types that we have, the materials that we have, because we had a large discussion, for example, what counts as a plate and what counts as a slab, for example, and things like that, and offer them for to a wider audience, and maybe if many projects at once decide to do this in some way or another, I don't know how, we can make this a Google Drive or something. I'm just making it up. This could lead us to somewhere, to be more precise. I even remember now, but somebody can, somebody might know better the link. There was somewhere a type of attempt at temporal ontology, at some sort of regularizing what the beginning of the 4th century means in terms of not before, not after, and how it is different from, say, the first quarter of the 4th century. And but I forgot the link. But we can try to integrate our own material as well as resources such as this somewhere, and try to kick off a talk somewhere about this. I don't know.
Yes, please, Gabi.
Yeah, just on the subject of vocabularies, there are all sorts of existing vocabularies, as Mitko said, which would be useful to collect. But I just sort of a note of warning. I very much like Martina's suggestion that, you know, there are vocabularies which cut completely across all of our disciplines and subdisciplines. But just to add a note of warning that there are also things which will be very, very difficult to cut across all those subdisciplines. You know, a bishop may mean the same thing to someone working on 5th century Greek world as to someone working on the 15th century Greek world, but it might mean something very different to someone working on another part of the world. And, you know, the terminology changes over time, and, you know, they become, you know, conflicting, and, you know, you can't even say there's an entity which is the concept of bishop that takes different names, and some of these other concepts also have the name bishop, because the concept isn't that neat. So what I sort of want to say there is we need to be very concrete about what vocabularies we need as individual projects, and then as individual subcommunities, and then to what degree those can be shared. And the reason the ego vocabularies look sort of really messy and vague is because they're bringing together every vocabulary that was in use in their component projects, and trying to come up with just a master vocabulary that at least gave everything an identifier, and that enabled us to start the work of cross-referencing and you know, saying, you know, these 3 things are just different names for the same thing, and this is a subset of this, and things like that, that could be the basis for interoperability work. I don't think anybody would say, oh, I don't know what set of categories to use for my type of inscriptions list, so I'm going to just download this entire big chunk from Eagle and use that as the basis, because it's unlikely to be relevant to any one project. Having said which, there are groups who are having conversations like this. Precisely the epigraphy.info group that Tom mentioned have conversations about vocabularies sometimes, and there are various other places where conversations happen. So we might want to keep in touch with those groups as well. But I think, to start with, if we wanted to take these conversations forward, as it were, do we want to imagine one or more special interest groups convening out of this conversation, and bringing in loads of other people who just didn't happen to be there this week, and various other people, and to the extent to which these are relevant to specifically to Epidoc activity, you could ask you know, the Epidoc committee, of which the chair is sat to my left, wherever Martina is on this screen, for some kind of support and publicity, so yeah, I mean, are there if we wanted to convene special interest groups, how many of them would be reasonably convened out of this conversation? Are there people here who say, I really want to be involved in this vocabulary conversation? Are there people here who will really want to be involved in this iconography discussion conversation? And are there other things that I've missed? Saying this as we're 21 minutes past the end of the round table officially. So rather than trying to have that conversation now, could we relatively quickly, not wanting to cut off Claudia, relatively quickly come up with a short list of special interest groups? And if there's at least one volunteer for each SIG, then it exists, right?
Yes, I completely agree with you, like 100%. And but Claudia wanted to say something.
No, Gabby just answered to the comment I wanted to make. So thanks.
Yes. I think it's. I think we should first of all come up with a list of things that we want to be. We want to have a discussion about. For example, I'm thinking iconography, for example. So the epithets of the Theotokos. I'm just making it up, which are relevant both for art history and for sigillography and for this and for that. So there are for sure many things that should be discussed and that should be taken into account, and before making this on a digital layer, let's say, we should have a internal coherence on how we refer to these entities. So let's come up with a short list of special interest groups. Definitely iconography, it's always a big shot.
Maybe a follow-up email after this roundtable.
Maybe a follow-up.
It'll be a first step. I don't know if we have the contacts of all the people who attended today. It will be bulky, but still, maybe, yeah.
Yes, we can definitely have a follow-up email and just come but with a deadline, not a follow-up email. So to have Gabby. Yes, definitely. And I mean, we, as Mitko said, we can definitely share the authority list that we, Sigidoc, made. And we have many, as you know. For example, Maria, when you talked about epithets, it was very interesting because we had, right after you talked, we kind of exchanged with Alessio, and we thought that we do have epithets, but we have Christ-related epithets, Theotokos-related epithets. So it's more like, it's more divided, let's say. It's not epithets in general, but it's, for example, for the saints, for the Theotokos, for Christ, for the emperor, this and that. So, for example, one can also think of either unifying all of this or of dividing the way we think and talk about epithets. So just as an example of what one could be doing in a very consequent and coherent way. Yes, so that were my 2 cents on the question. I can volunteer to send a follow-up email on special interest groups relating to Byzantine, to all things Byzantium, let's say, and to see what happens. Yes, Olga.
This is going to be very helpful, I think. I mean, the work that you do with Sigidoc is certainly covers, everything, all the seals, all possible types, with all possible iconographic motifs, type of legends, and whatever. And I was thinking that, for example, for the work that we do for the Tacticon, we have already created such lists where we have tried to homogenize the vocabulary, for example, apart from the epithets that follow Virgin Mary, how do you describe the various types of crosses? Another example, patriarchal, cross-potent, on how many steps, whether the floral decoration goes up to the middle or high up and whatever else. So I personally would be very interested to compare, discuss, and get feedback so that I can be sure that, you know, all this type of information that we use on Tacticon, and this is actually a very nice coincidence because we're about to update our website, complies, you know, with work that has already been done at SIGIDOC. So in order to have this, you know, interoperability, I think this is a great term, and, you know, this is the way forward. You know, the various databases should communicate to each other. I mean, we do a different work, although we use seals. Seals is not our only object, our only evidence. But I think it would be great if, you know, the way we present seals is identical and talks to the system of SIGIDOC, actually, because, you know, that's the prototype. That's how I see it. So I would certainly be very interested in follow-up, you know, discussions, according, probably organized in groups according to the type of material, maybe, that, you know, these groups are working on. I don't know. I think that people
not necessarily.
Not necessarily.
No.
I don't know. Okay, but inscriptions for I'm saying this because inscriptions on one-sided, you know, substructures are different to inscriptions on two faces object. But maybe you're right, Maria.
A very simple Hermit can appear on a seal and it can appear on a painting. So it depends on what interest group you are talking about. A group focused on the support or on so there might be different offshots. But there are certain issues that, as Gabi
cover
said,
common
many
ground.
others, they cut across, and so, and it's better, I mean, for us, because sigillography deals with people, persons attested. It will be very useful for us to see how these persons are treated once we begin, because we have personal, as I said, we have very different people. We have from personifications to divine, anyway, but we would like to benefit from the experience of sigilographers. And that's one field that we can. So if you cut us out, then it will be
no.
It will not be
no such intention.
Leave historians out, please.
Okay.
Just a note as well that interoperability, but in the way you handle vocabularies, doesn't have to mean using the same vocabulary. It can also mean just recognizing the best way to point to your vocabularies, that is, you know, by some sort of, you know, an identifier, which ideally is also a web address that can take you somewhere to find out more about this, and how to express the relationship between these different terms. So you know, we could end up with very different actual vocabularies in two different projects, but they're still interoperable because those, I mean, even if they're very different, they will still have some overlap. I almost guarantee any two projects, you know, whether it's, you know, you know, Mycenaean inscriptions and 19th century gravestones, there will be some overlap in you know, materials used and you know, shapes and things like this, however small. But if they're pointing to the same kind of objects, then they still have some interoperability. So we will want to think, or sorry, I'm taking first person out of the sentence. Whoever joins that special interest group, you will want to think about what to use as your authority for to sit behind the provider of those identifiers, to sit behind your vocabularies. And, you know, you might want to ally with someone like Eagle to, because, you know, if your items were added to the E vocabularies, then you would have your, you know, these identifiers for them. Or you might want to use something like Wikidata, which will provide identifiers for things and is, you know, is very, very stable and is guaranteed to be around for many years. And the item doesn't have to have a Wikipedia page in order to be to have a Wikidata identifier. And if it does have a Wikipedia page and that Wikipedia page is wrong, that doesn't mean your use of the identifier is wrong, right? So they're independent from each other in that sense. So there's various ways in which you can do that, but giving it some sort of institutional infrastructural sort of backbone behind your vocabulary, I think will be extremely valuable thing to do. And if all else fails, you could put up a page yourself with those identifiers on, but that's really the last option if all else has failed, because how long are you going to guarantee that website stays up and that people that the people in charge of it are going to always want to keep on updating it and keeping it stable and so forth. So you really want to try and tie it to something big if possible. It's just a thought, but yeah, I mean the differences between vocabularies are a strength of this as well, because if we all used exactly the same vocabulary, we wouldn't really need the infrastructure. The fact that we have overlapping vocabularies forces us to think about infrastructure in a way that makes us more sustainable and makes it easier for us to then interoperate when we want to interface with another project that we'd never thought of interacting with before, when someone's doing a corpus of completely different inscriptions from a different part of the world that unexpectedly has a lot in common with one or other of our vocabularies.
Definitely. Thank you, Gabby. So, should we slowly come to an end?
Yes. Call it a day. I think it was wonderful, and thanks to everybody for the participation, for the presentations, discussions, and so on. So we will definitely not stop here. So we hope that we'll continue our discussion in one way or another, and we'll have a lot of think.
Yes, and expect very soon a follow-up email on this topic.
Yes.
And yeah, which are crucial and are long overdue, in my honest opinion.
If I can reiterate Martina's invitation, or I forget if it was Mitko's invitation to join the Epidoc markup list. I think anybody who has contributed anything to this conversation today or anytime this week will find that will have things to contribute in that forum as well. That's obviously I can't decide for you if you want to be on a markup list where other people's questions and answers also end up in your inbox. But yeah, Martina's just posted the link to the thing. You can sign up there. I think it's the low traffic list. On average, there are between 2 and 10 emails per month. So it's not, it's not something that's going to be a problem for anybody. But it's this sort of conversation absolutely belongs there as well.
Definitely. Cool. So it would be great to have drinks now, but alas, we cannot. So let's adjourn for the day. I would say thank you all for participating and for the super fruitful discussion. And I hope that also the students from the training week benefited from it. I'm more than positive